You're watching No More News.
Adam Green here with No More News. I've wanted to make this video for a long time. It's a compilation of former Infowars and Alex Jones employees and guests who have recently been speaking out about Infowars. And some of the trends you'll notice here are that Alex Jones refuses to criticize Israel. He forces his employees to sign non-disclosure agreements. He's untrustworthy, and the reoccurring theme that just you shouldn't trust Alex Jones and that he lacks integrity. So let's get into it. The first example is former employee Rob Jacobson. He helped Alex Jones edit all of his original documentaries. He worked for Infowars for well over 10 years. And just a few months ago, he was fired from Infowars. And he's been speaking out on Facebook about Alex Jones, trying to warn us all about the fraud that Alex Jones is. Here's a post on Facebook from Rob Jacobson. He says, quote, "You hardly hear Alex talk about the $500 billion in weapons Trump sold to the Saudis. And when he does mention it, he has this cartoony line. Trump looked the Saudis in the eye and said, 'You better not use this for Islamic Jihad. You have to be stupid to buy this.' But Alex says Trump is fighting ISIS instead of arming them. Trump sold the Saudis $500 billion in weapons. Alex is a duplicitous liar, and these people who remain in his audience are little thumb-sucking cult members." And then Shane Bullis asks, "Rob, how long ago did you leave?" And he says, "A few months ago." A guy that worked with Alex for over 10 years is calling him a duplicitous liar and saying his audience are thumb-sucking cult members. Now here's the clip of Rob Jacobson speaking out against Trump and his actions that likely got him fired from Infowars.
Last week, during the Syrian missile strike, I think Trump missed his opportunity to go after the COG, period. That was his opportunity. That was his window. And instead of going after him, he went with them. And I understand what Mike Cernovich said about, oh, this is a big boy world and a big boy place. And I gave that a lot of thought, and how when you become the president and you step onto a large playing field, you have to start playing the game with the big boys. I don't buy it. I don't buy it. We elected a leader, and what we got is the same old stuff. Okay?
See, and I agree with that. And I think that...
And I'm going to tell you where Mike was wrong.
Go ahead.
Okay? He was saying that, you got to become part of the game. And what we wanted was somebody to lead us through the fog, not become part of the fog. And that's where he failed. And when he launched those missiles, he became part of the fog. He lost. It's over. I'm sorry. I mean, we should be going after the COG. We should be going after them. And that was our opportunity. And what Trump could have done is he could have said, let me step back, let me do an investigation, and let me expose the fact that it was people part of the COG, people who are in our government that committed this crime. Let's expose those people and yank them out. But instead of it, he became those people. It's over. It's over. What if China is behind North Korea? How do we know? There's a big piece of chocolate cake that was very impressive. We don't know this stuff. We got a guy in there. It's over. He's beaten. That's my point of view. Unless he could humble himself and come out to the American people and say, I was played. I'm going to backtrack on that. I'm going to expose the COG. I'm going to expose the criminals in our government. We have no shot. That's my point.
And that's why Rob Jacobson needs his own radio show. Pat, go ahead.
Good one, dude. Sure, you're going to give Rob Jacobson his own radio show. I'm guessing you mean somewhere else besides Infowars, because he was fired right after this. And here's another example of Rob Jacobson admitting that Alex refuses to criticize Israel, which is an accusation that many people throw at Alex Jones. And now one of his long-term former employees is confirming it. Alex Jones refuses to criticize Israel because he's obviously a big fat Zionist shill. Rob Jacobson writes, I agree, they never touch Israel. They selectively talk about Trump. Alex lately is very critical of others' behavior while he acts out in the most insane ways. I'm normal. They've become the National Enquirer of the internet media world.
This guy does some great stuff. We've played his videos in the past. It's No More News.
The next example is former Alex Jones sidekick Aaron Dykes, who a few years ago left Infowars So here's Aaron Dykes on Facebook. He says the long-awaited Obama Deception 2. So he's mocking Alex Jones for never coming out with the Obama Deception 2 like he had promised. And here on the left, he says, 8 years ago, you ragged on Obama supporters who bought into hope and change. And on the right, he has Trump's face over Obama's, and it says, this time the deception is on you. So it's former Alex Jones sidekick, great researcher and reporter at Infowars, is trying to tell all the Info Warriors out there, do not listen to Alex Jones, do not fall for Trump. They are both compromised puppets. Next, we have a clip of Aaron Dykes and his wife, Melissa Melton, who both worked at Infowars. And it's them on a radio show shortly after they quit Infowars, talking about the NDAs and the suspicious activity going on at Infowars. Here it is.
I don't know even what to believe anymore about. I've heard so many crazy things in the last couple of weeks alone, things I can't talk about or say. I mean, yes, we signed non-disclosure agreements at that place. Everyone knows this. Everyone has to sign one. Well, most people have to sign one. And yes, since we left, we're in the, we've been not so subtly reminded multiple times that we signed that and that we better shut our freaking mouths. Here's the thing. If I wanted to be at Infowars, I would be at Infowars. I would still be there. Aaron would still be there. We quit. Okay, we did choose to leave and we quit and we left, and now we're doing what we're doing now. If we wanted to still be embroiled in the drama or dealing with the BS or doing it, we would not have quit, right? We would have still be there. We don't want to be there. There's a reason we're not there. That's why. And I hate it because I have people that I care about, people on Facebook that I'm friends with, and they keep asking me to say a bunch of stuff, and it's like, okay, I have children. It's not, I guess if we get sued and screamed at or what, I mean, they could take my nothing that I don't have, but I mean, it's kind of like, I just want to focus on the work I'm trying to do. I don't want to get mired in all of this infighting and blacklisting and the BS, because it just goes on, and it's pointless in the end of the day because we're all trying to supposedly do the same thing here.
Next, we have another Alex Jones former protege, Anthony Gucciardi, who recently left Infowars. We don't know why or how. He hasn't publicly admitted it. Alex Jones has been silent about him leaving, like he usually is when he has falling out with all of his employees. And so Anthony Gucciardi is gone now. He used to be like his number one sidekick. Now he's just on Twitter and Facebook posting inspirational quotes. I think something's going on with Gucciardi. I wish he would talk to me. I've tried to contact him, but he won't respond. Probably out of fear of the NDAs and the threats like Melissa and Aaron just spoke about. But here is a secret recording that somebody secretly recorded Anthony Gucciardi at a restaurant or a bar, and it was when he first started working with Alex Jones. Listen to what Anthony Gucciardi says about Alex Jones as a person, like his character and his ego and his integrity.
To him, the only thing that matters is his fame and his power over the industry or whatever. He basically told me that he hates every single one of his reporters and that they suck.
Next up, we have former editor and webmaster at Infowars.com, Kurt Nimmo, who was recently fired from Infowars for not going along with the Trump cheerleading. Here, Kurt Nimmo told the Daily Beast in this article, The War Inside Infowars. Kurt Nimmo tells the Daily Beast that he has noticed the general framework and voice of the site shift into becoming essentially a pro-Trump propaganda outfit, something that he perceives as an abandonment of Infowars' initial focus on the New World Order, or as Jones would call it, the establishment. I totally agree. I've witnessed this shift take place myself. Nimmo said in an email to the Daily Beast, I disagree with Alex Jones on Donald Trump. I believe Donald Trump is an enabler of crony capitalism, the same as his predecessors. I also believe he will not end the wars started by Bush and continued by Obama. I cannot support a man who will further war and murder. Alex Jones has more or less ignored this and considers Trump a patriot and a defender of the Constitution. This is clearly wrong. Support for Trump also means supporting waterboarding, killing the families of suspected terrorists, squandering trillions more on a bloated military, supporting Israel despite its crimes against humanity, omitting Saudi Arabia from the list of terrorist states, and further militarizing police in the U.S. Alex Jones previously opposed most of these things, with the exception of Israel, which he has refused to criticize. Okay, I don't want to hear Alex Jones ever say that he fairly criticizes Israel. He doesn't. Everybody says he's a Zionist shill. He refuses to criticize Israel. And here is Alex Jones's former editor of Infowars website and the webmaster admitting Alex Jones, quote, has refused to criticize Israel. Kurt Nimmo also takes some shots at Alex Jones's current sidekick, Paul Joseph Watson. He says, quote, if we are to judge Paul Joseph Watson by his editorials and tweets, he is an Islamophobe, little different than Geert Wilders or Pamela Geller. He has embraced the alt-right philosophy on Islam. I disagree with this. The United States government and the military-industrial complex are far more threatening to our liberty than a gaggle of crazy Islamists, many supported by the CIA in Saudi Arabia. Paul Joseph Watson wasn't claiming back then that Islam would destroy the world. In fact, he wrote radical jihadis were created by the CIA and British intelligence. Guess he doesn't talk about that much anymore. Kurt Nimmo says, quote, I don't know if revealing this is part of the confidentiality agreement, but I cannot consent to Watson lying about him. Yeah, Alex Jones and Watson told everybody that Kurt Nimmo was lazy and that's why they fired him, but we all know it's because Kurt Nimmo wasn't going along with the Trump cheerleading. Nimmo continues that he was told by other former employees that Alex Jones was angry about his repeated requests for health care insurance. My wife and I are in our mid-60s and I find it unconscionable for the multi-million-dollar operation not to provide health insurance for employees. I merely do not wish for the article to say I was let go due to poor work performance. We know that's not true, Kurt. We know Alex Jones is a fraud and he fired you because you are not a yes man that agrees with everything the dictator authoritarian Alex Jones says. Next up, we have another former Alex Jones sidekick, Luke Ridkowski from We Are Change. He posts on Facebook and says, this is why alternative media can't have nice things. Really, bro? Come on. And he links to an Infowars article with the headline, 10 times that God has hit America with a major disaster after the U.S. attempted to divide the land of Israel. Because Barack Obama has cursed Israel at the United Nations, America is now under a curse. What a joke. This is from Alex Jones, who claims he's not a Zionist. He says that we're cursed if we don't support and defend Israel no matter what. An absolute rabid Zionist would say that. And we didn't curse Israel at the United Nations. 15 other countries voted that the settlements are illegal and Israel is doing illegal war crimes against the apartheid Palestinians. All America did was abstain their veto vote. 15 other countries voted and America just decided to not veto it like they always do every year. We're protecting them because they own us. If you look at this article that they posted, it is ridiculous. They basically say that every time we do something bad to Israel, we get a hurricane or an earthquake or a tornado, and it's just such a joke. I mean, the fear, he wants us to think that God is attacking us because we don't support Israel, but he's not a Zionist, sure. Next up, we have Luke Ridkowski interviewing former longtime guest of Infowars show, David Icke. He hasn't been back on since the Trump era came to be, but it's Luke and David Icke criticizing Alex Jones, not by name, but they're definitely talking about him, for cheerleading for Trump and for betraying all the things that Alex Jones and Infowars supposedly stood for in the past.
We had a very important conversation last night, especially when it comes to the state of alternative media. What is the state of alternative media, David?
Well, I think it's sad the way some of the alternative media has gone. In fact, quite a significant part of it, particularly in the United States. This man is going to take on what they call the globalists. And as a result of that, the narrative has changed in these parts of the alternative media from you can't trust any of them, it's all a rigged system, to actually it is rigged but against Trump in favor of Clinton. And what I see is some areas of the alternative media becoming little more than an alternative Fox News. Now, terrorist events are not being dissected in the way they were before by this particular area of the alternative media anyway. They're being used as a means to bash Muslims. and to cast all Muslims with the actions of a few. I find it very unpleasant to see videos from alternative researchers talking about the hate of Islam and the way it's a hate religion. And they're delivering those videos with absolute hatred in their eyes and in their face. What I'm sure many people who've kind of followed the alternative media, I'm sure many of them are a bit confused about what's going on. It's not the way anything's going to change, because what they're doing is becoming that which they've claimed to be exposing. They're becoming the polarity. They're becoming the means for divide and rule, instead of bringing people together. For me, it borders on the embarrassing for the alternative media.
It's embarrassing, but it also has a way of showing people who really is in the game, because this regression, as you called it, like we've been talking about last night, is massive. It's expansive. We went from people saying the system is rigged, don't vote for the lesser of two evils, to saying, well, let's trust the system. Well, he's a little bit less evil. Let's put all of our faith and energy into this.
And here's one more short clip of David Icke calling out alternative media people like Alex Jones, who refuse to call out Rothschild Zionism.
Most people, the overwhelming majority of people in what we call conspiracy research, won't touch this subject, right? Well, I'm going to bloody touch it, because I'm sick of it. And I'm sick of people being frightened and intimidated into not touching it. Rothschild Zionism.
Now we have another former wingman of Alex Jones, Jason Bermas, who helped produce the hit documentaries Loose Change, Invisible Empire, Fabled Enemies, and here he is calling out Alex Jones for his cheerleading for Trump and for his lack of ethics and morals when it comes to objectively covering the Trump administration.
Now, unfortunately, we also live in a day and age where some of the alternative media seem to be cheerleaders for the Trump administration. To ignore the fact that Goldman Sachs is heavily represented in this administration, to ignore the fact that his technology advisor, Peter Thiel, sits on the board of Bilderberg, to ignore the fact that he's dealing with Saudi Arabia, who we know have been arming Islamic jihadis for some time now, and spin that as though that's not happening, is very dangerous as well.
Even Ron Paul has been calling out Alex Jones. In this clip, he says Alex Jones sounds like a neocon with his bomb North Korea propaganda.
I don't want to have to, nuke the DMZ. But if they do strike us first, I think they may be crazy enough to do it, then it's going to take a major commitment to make sure they can't counter-respond.
You're buying into all the garbage that's passed out there by the deep state and neoconservatives and the media. Alex, you're speaking for the neoconservatives. That's their line of talk of why we have to do this.
Now we have another former longtime guest on the Alex Jones Infowars show, Wayne Madsen, also speaking out against Alex Jones. Just a few months ago, Alex Jones was talking about hiring Wayne, and Wayne went to the RNC and the DNC to report for Infowars. But now Wayne is speaking out like he should, because Alex Jones is a fraud. Here's a tweet that Wayne put up where he says, Alex Jones amends his remarks to show he is still crazier than a shithouse rat. And here's another tweet where he says that Alex Jones photoshops Trump on WWE mat in 2013, making it appear that it is Shakespeare on the Park play. Jones is a bloated, lying shitbag. So, harsh words from Wayne for Alex Jones. Well deserved. And here's a clip of Wayne on the Richie Allen show, and they're speaking about the terrible things that have been happening at Infowars.
That these people have no idea what they're talking about, and that includes Alex Jones and the rest. I don't know what deals he's cut. Maybe he's been given a promise by Trump that Infowars and his, selling of Dr. Feelgood snake oil will have for it carved out a special amount of bandwidth on the internet.
Wayne, I'm going to pick you up on what you said about Infowars, and I'm doing that because you're not the first guest who's been on the program recently who has had a relationship with Infowars, who's become frustrated or disheartened by what's been going on there. Now, I put my cards on the table. I've known Alex for about 10 years, and I used to invite him to come on my programs regularly, and he did. And we had some pretty interesting conversations over the years. But what I've seen, especially leading up to the election, the blanket support of Donald Trump, let's be honest about it, Wayne, you're a journalist, the dreadful, disgraceful interview that Alex did with Trump when he never challenged him or asked him a single question. What's happened to Infowars? Was it something that was building? Was Alex always kind of like that? Was he always ambitious to place his brand alongside Fox News? Or has something more sinister happened there in recent years, in your opinion?
Well, my take is that, look, you know, many people have said through the years there's no such thing as bad publicity. There's only publicity. And he's gotten good and bad. Trump has helped him immensely. And I believe he was in negotiations to try to carve out something on the cable, one of the cable news networks. Now that's good and fine, but you know, sometimes overachieving or too much success can ruin an entity. Sometimes you can overachieve. You try to grab off more, and then you lose your base. You're trying to please people in Hollywood, and you totally disconnect from people in, you know, rural Oklahoma, for example.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
I think that's what's happening in Austin, Texas, to a large degree.
And you can't all of a sudden start saying things that you don't really believe in to suit another audience, to bring more viewers your way. And Alex was very much of the understanding that, you know, Democrats, Republicans, two sides of the same coin. The oligarchs, as you said, Wayne, control all of that. And Alex was pretty principled in saying that for many, many years. And then, of course, he abandoned that principle. It's brought him a lot of extra viewers and listeners, no doubt about that. But it's a tragedy, really, is my opinion.
Being a sycophant for the president is not being a journalist. And the constant exaggerations.
And finally, we'll end it with a few statements from former Alex Jones, quote, wingman, Jack Blood.
For years, I propped up Alex Jones. For years, I had to answer for his behavior, make excuses for it. I'm not just somebody that, you know, is online that listens to this stuff. I was inside. I hosted that show, okay? Many of you remember. In fact, I'm going to play a clip here in a second. I hosted the Alex Jones Show many, many, many times. What I'm telling you is that what comes from Alex Jones Corp is not honest. He is not an honest broker. He could care less, really, about Texas, about liberty, about the Republic, about 9/11 truth. All he cares about is controlling the country, controlling the world. These are the very people that if they ever take over are going to be 10 times worse than the oppressors you have now, because they have no conscience. That they'll say anything to get hits on their website. They don't care.
You did some work with Alex Jones.
Yeah, I was his wingman. I used to go help him pick up girls. I hosted his show. I worked with him intimately for quite a few years, and he's changed. He's not the same guy he used to be. And Alex Jones has a little cult. I know people think that, you know, I'm some, you know, jealous ninny or something talking about stuff like this, but I want people to know the truth. I want to spare them from what happened to me and what's happened to so many people out there. That the guy is absolutely 100% fake.
So there you have it, everybody. All of Alex Jones's ex-employees are speaking out and trying to warn his listeners about the fraud that he is. Alex Jones is a Zionist gatekeeper. All of his former wingmen, sidekicks, acolytes, proteges have all spoken out against him. They're trying to warn us, and I'm trying to warn you because I haven't signed the NDA. Just imagine what all of these ex-employees would be saying if they weren't forced and threatened with these NDAs. I never signed one. I would have never signed one. I can't believe I ever wanted to work for Alex Jones. He's such a Zionist shill. Trump is a Zionist puppet, and Alex Jones has really revealed himself as a compromised propagandist fraud at this latest election. So I'm just warning everybody, stay away from Alex Jones's show, stay away from his website. He is a compromised shill. This isn't a video I want to be doing. I don't want to be wasting my time going after Alex Jones, but he's pretending to be our friend. He's the leader of the opposition, and he's controlled opposition. So I have to point it out. We have to get him out of the way. We have to get all of the new alternative media people off the Alex Jones reservation and focused on real truth, not a compromised shill. I'm Adam Green with No More News. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe and stay tuned for a lot more videos coming soon.
A citizen YouTuber known as Know Your News, Adam Green's excellent channel,